Again, welcome to the Wholesome Wave National Nutrition Incentive Network interactive tutorial on using the report functions of FM Tracks. My name is Elizabeth Atwell, and I'm a program associate with Wholesome Wave, and I'll be presenting on this tutorial with my colleague, Katie Merritt. This webinar is designed to help FM Tracks users and members of the National Nutrition Incentive Network to better understand how to use the power of the data you've been recording all season long to generate useful reports on your market and nutrition incentive program. This webinar will be available for your future reference and as a training for other staff or volunteers, and you can forward the recording along to them once you receive the link after the webinar. In 2014, the incentive programs we partnered with reached over 50,000 consumers, 5,600 farmers, and leveraged $3.3 million in incentives and federal benefits. 2015 has been a very exciting year for NIN members. This year, we are in 32 states, working in 79 network members that represents 588 direct-to-consumer markets, including farmers markets, CSAs, and mobile markets. With this rapid expansion, we have recognized a need to build the capacity of incentive program operators as they move from the beginning stages of programs up to the higher stages of community and statewide networks. The assistance we provide come in the form of technical assistance and webinars and personal technical assistance, data collection and evaluation, such as the tools provided of FM Tracks, a community of practice, including our listserv, webinars, our conference coming up in January, and finally, all of the data that has been submitted or recorded by network members across the state is aggregated at a national level so that we can leverage this for policy and outreach. Throughout this past year, hundreds of markets, including CSAs and mobile markets, have been recording their data on the National Nutrition Incentive website, FM Tracks. Now that most of these markets have completed their data for the season, we want to show you how to use FM Tracks combined with a few basic Excel skills covered on this webinar to generate reports on your market and nutrition incentive program. What we will cover today is how to use FM Tracks to export data from the website, how to generate pivot tables on sales and redemption data, how to use conditional formatting, and how to use a useful feature of Google Charts to generate some really easy to use graphs from your data. Before we begin, I'd like to get a better idea of the level of familiarity in the room of using Excel. I'm going to push out a few polls, and if you will just take a moment to answer it by clicking on your screen. So the first question is, how comfortable are you using basic functions in Excel, including sorting, filtering, formatting, and using simple equations? Great, so it looks like there's a general level of about half the people in the room are pretty comfortable with some basics. Some have some intermediate knowledge, while some others need to learn a little bit more. And I do want to say that Excel has an amazing range of functions. We could teach an entire course on Excel, and there are those resources online, but what we hope to do today is to show you a few simple tools that will make using Excel easy for people of all knowledge ranges. Great. For those of you that are a little bit more comfortable with Excel, how many people have used pivot tables before? Great. So a few people are really excited about about pivot tables. Some have a little bit of experience. Maybe you took a course at one point, but aren't so sure anymore. And over half the room hasn't used them before. So hopefully this will be a really great resource for most of you. Last question. How comfortable are you making charts in Excel? Great. So it looks like about half the people are pretty comfortable and some aren't. Only a few are very comfortable. So we're not going to be going into charts in Excel today. Instead, we want to just show you a really quick and easy to use tool that'll help you be able to generate charts at just the click of a button. So now that we have taken care of that, let's get started. I'm going to hand things over to my colleague Katie Merritt to get us started today.
Great. All right. So to start, we're actually going to go to the FM Tracks webpage. So that's fmtracks.org. And I'm going to log in. And from my front page, which is as an admin maybe a little bit different than yours, I'm going to go straight to the reports section of the website. From this reports tab, which you can get to from any markets page on the dashboard, there's two types of reports that you're going to be able to download. One of them is a transaction report, and that's where all of your sales data is going to be. And the other one are questions reports. So any questions you've answered, how many vendors were eligible today at the market, that's considered a questions report, and it's going to come from here. But so for transactions report, you can go ahead, you can select an individual market, or if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll find any networks that you're associated with are going to be down here. If you want to run it for, let's say, all markets that you're associated with, of course, you'll just leave it blank, and that will pull the data from anything your email account is associated with. We've also got a way to limit the data here by date, as well as things like you could run a report specifically for EBT. So leaving all of this blank, it's going to just pull everything. And then you can see here, this infographic is created and it updates based on which box you're looking at. So this is for total number of transactions in the whole system, number of dollars in sales, and if you wanted this quickly just for EBT, just run it for EBT and then you would have that breakdown. Total amount of incentives that have been distributed, and the total of unique new users. But this is categorized based on whether or not these new users are using FM Tracks IDs. And so if your market isn't using FM Tracks IDs, this number might not be as accurate as those that are using them consistently. So the important thing we're going to do here, while these are quick statistics that are going to be pulled, I actually want to export the entire spreadsheet into Excel. So that's when you're going to go to this little button here that says Export. So I'm going to make the screen bigger, but I think for people that are having a hard time, I'll just zoom in a lot. So this is the button here that I'm talking about, Export. It is very small on the screen, but what you're going to want to look for is this green icon. And we're going to press that. And I'm going to go ahead and minimize so you can see what's actually going on my computer here. When you export the file, it's going to download as a zip file. That's going to be compressed, and on my computer, I have a utility that will go ahead and decompress the zip file and expand it into the CSV. Let's see. Here we go. So you can see how this pop-up comes up. If you don't have a Mac, or if you're using a browser or something where you don't have a tool like this in here, what you need to do is Google with your particular operating system to find a tool that will be able to decompress zip files. It's a pretty common application, but it might not be installed on your computer already. So we're going to click OK. And we see how the utility has converted it here in my files. And I've got it now not just as a zip file, but as a CSV. And so again, I don't think I can zoom in on this screen in particular, but you can see how it says d.csv. That's comma separated values. And when you open it, it's going to look just like an Excel file. But I do recommend that when you save it, that you save it as an Excel file just by clicking Save As. For the purpose of this webinar, though, I wanted to go ahead and do a demo more with what a market would be seeing instead of showing the report for the entire network. And so here, and I will go ahead and maybe zoom this in a little bit and make sure everybody can see. But the first thing I just want to show you guys are some really simple Excel basic tools and functionalities that are going to help you look at this data set. So the first thing you're going to want to do, perhaps, is sort it and make it chronological. And since our dates are in column A, there's a very quick way of doing this where we're going to press this A to Z sort button. See that it arranges data in ascending and descending order. So right off the bat, it's rearranged the data. If I press it again, it goes back to the way it was. And then if I actually want to do something more sophisticated, the best way to do this is just a custom sort. So anytime you want to sort based on a different column. And I want to sort by market, but then I want within the market, it's sorted by date. So now we see for the Chamber of Secrets markets, the dates on this row are all chronological. Another thing you might want to do to help clean up this initial data set is actually filter it. So by pressing this funnel up here, that's going to filter the data set or give me the option to. And so I might want to say, I just want to look at Snap EBT. So I'll deselect all, and I'm going to click Snap EBT here in this checkbox. From there, I know that all my Snap incentives that I distributed, it has this generic label here, a match program, but I'm actually going to say at the Potter Network, we use Magic Bucks. So we're going to go ahead and change that one. And then here's a tip. What you can do to then change this throughout the column I is to drag it down like this, and it'll change whichever ones you drag it to. But a more efficient way to do this for the entire rest of the column, if I hover my mouse on the far right bottom corner, I have these crosshairs that are coming up. I'm not sure how easy it is to see, but you can see how it changes into the crosshairs when it's on this exact point. And all I'm going to do is double click, and you can see how it's now changed it for everything, and that goes all the way down until it runs into a cell with an adjacent blank field. So in case somebody didn't see that, I'm just going to undo it, and then here, clicking again, far right corner, double click. Great. So that's just your really basic Excel functionality of how you can change your data. But at this point, Elizabeth is actually going to show us a much more sophisticated way of regrouping this data so that it's in a usable, readable format that's easy to manipulate.
Great. So as I said earlier, Excel is a really amazing program. It has a huge range of functionality, and we could go on for many a webinar on all of its capabilities. But what is, in my opinion, by far the coolest and most useful function of Excel are pivot tables. Now, if you want to really easily impress your friends and family at your holiday party, you can just show them your data in a pivot table, because what it allows you to do is take a data set that is maybe hundreds or thousands of entries long, which is pretty unwieldy and hard to analyze, and collapse it all into usable rows and columns so you can really easily digest your data and see the exact points that you are interested in studying. So looking at this transaction report, this is what transaction reports will look like downloaded from the website. If we want to be able to analyze market sales of Snap EBT and corresponding incentives by date, this export has so much data in it that it's pretty hard to see. Putting it in a pivot table will allow us to easily analyze it. So to do a pivot table, start by selecting all of the data that you want to analyze. A really easy way to select all is to click on this top left box right here, and you'll see that that's going to highlight all of my data. Next, I'm going to go up to this tab and select Data. From here, under Analysis, we'll see an icon that says Pivot Table. Hover over it and we'll say Summarize and Analyze Data using a Pivot Table. Clicking on that is going to generate a new sheet down here. I'm going to right-click to rename it, and we'll call this pivot table transactions. So you'll see here, this black box is called the pivot table builder. It's like your toolbox for a pivot table. Any fields that you drag under column labels, row labels, or values are going to populate with the information you have drug in. When you first create a pivot table, it's going to populate pretty randomly. So this isn't really useful having customer as a row label and days of week as a column. To remove these, I just click it and I drag it out of the pivot table builder, and like magic, poof, it's gone. So I'm going to remove everything and we're going to start with a blank state. So here we have row areas, value areas, and columns. So a great way to familiarize yourself with pivot tables is just to play around. And you can see that anything I drag in, it's going to populate with. I can put date as rows. I can put it as columns. I can enter day of the week. Just have some fun playing around and coming up with a spreadsheet that works best for you. But for analyzing your transaction data, I suggest you break it up if you're working with multiple markets, first by markets, and then beneath that row, select date. Again, I can rearrange it as I see fit, but this is a really good way that it's going to allow me to see the transactions for each market day for any markets within my network. Next, I want to analyze payment type. So that's what I'm going to make my column headers as. So again, I simply click payment type and I drag it into column. So now we'll see that for these markets, they were analyzing credit and debit card as well as SNAP EBT purchases. Now I need to populate the values. So the corresponding data with payment type is purchase amount. I'll select that and drag it into values. Now, when you first drag something into values, it's going to come up with the value as count, which means the number of transactions, which isn't necessarily what we want to see. So to change that, I can click on this info icon right here, and it's going to give me a pop-out box from which I can change the type of value that is inside of these data fields. So if I wanted to know the average of purchase amount, I just select average and press OK. And now I can see that the average SNAP EBT purchase for the Chamber of Secrets Farmers Market was $12.20. So this is another fun thing to play around with, but for our purposes, I'm going to say that I want to see the sum. So I want to see the total across all markets. So now I can see that the sum of SNAP EBT transactions for it was $427. I see here that there's a blank column that I don't really want, and so if you want to remove any columns, you can do so by collecting this down arrow by column. It is automatically selecting all, but say that I just want to analyze SNAP EBT, I will deselect all by clicking it and then just select SNAP EBT. So now I can see the purchase amount for each market. So to see incentive amount, I can go back to my builder, grab incentive from the field name, drag it into values. Again, it's automatically populating with the count. So to change that, I'm going to scroll up, go to sum, press OK. And now I can see I have my totals of some purchase amount and some incentive amount for the entire network. This top green line next to the name of the market is going to show the sum of that individual market. And down on the bottom, we'll have the grand total for all markets within the network. Pivot tables generally generate the total sum as the last one or two columns. So if I ever wanted to hide a column so that I don't see this repeat, what you can do is select the column. An easy way to select multiple columns is to click the column, press Command, click the other column that you want to select. Then if I go here into the formatting bar, I'm going to click the icon that says Format, go down to Hide Column, and ta-da! So here I can I've gone from all of this data, hard to see, hard to analyze, and now here I have in a really easy to understand format. Pivot tables, I'm in the top 4% of loving them. They have a lot of capabilities. One thing that you can't do within a pivot table is edit the data. sorry about that, or generate graphs from it. So an easy way to do that is to copy the data. So you can do Command C, and now I want to put this in a new sheet. One thing to note about if you are copying and pasting data from a pivot table is you can't just click paste as you normally would. You need to click the arrow beside paste and paste it as values. Otherwise, it will just paste the pivot table itself. But when I paste it as values, I'll see that all of the data has been transferred into an editable format. We can see here that the way that it pasted the values, it's kind of condensed and I can't quite see everything. If you ever want to expand columns so that they are all in a readable width, if you just select all the columns that you are working with, click this kind of in-between line on the columns twice, and there we go. It's expanded everything so I can see all the dates, that we have the sum of purchase amount and sum of incentive amount. So next I want to move on to show you how to create a pivot table for your post-market questions. But first I want to see if we have any questions.
While we're waiting for people to get some questions in, because we know we covered a lot, I just want to lighten the mood. And so I'm going to tell a joke. So what's the difference between pea soup and roast beef? Well, anybody can roast beef. We're getting some creative questions in, but just want to give it one more minute in case anyone has a longer question. But otherwise, we will just move on to the questions pivot table and then break for questions again.
All right, no questions. Okay, bring them in if you have them. Otherwise, we might tell more jokes. So to generate a questions report, you go to the FM Tracks page and go to the reports function. So previously we were downloading a transaction report. We want to download a question report. Now a question report will generate all of your post-market questions. And if you are an FM Tracks user that has been using FM Tracks on the app at Market and tracking new and repeat user questions using FM Tracks IDs, that will also be exported in a questions report. Again, you can select for a particular market, though if you leave it blank, it will just download a report for all markets associated with your network. You can also limit the report to certain date ranges. But if you want to get a picture for all of your markets for the entire market season, simply go to the questions report page, press export. Again, it's going to download the file as a CSV, which you can then unzip, open, and save as an Excel workbook. Since I already have mine open, I'm not going to open this and just go right into our example. So this is what a typical questions report will look like. Again, we see that our data is grouped by question text and that we have hundreds of entries. So this is pretty hard to actually analyze. So once again, dun, da, 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 pivot tables coming to the rescue. So one of the first things that I want to do is I would like to combine this workbook with the workbook on transaction that I was working in earlier. So the way to do that, one moment, is to, if you go to the tab of the sheet that you are working on, and you can right click it, or if you're on a laptop, press Control and then click it. So I can rename it, so I'll call it question data, press enter, and then to copy it to another workbook, again just right click and then select move or copy. So here it says, to which book do I want to move it to? It's automatically populated with the one I'm working on. I'm going to go back to the transaction export that I was on before. If you click move to end, it'll just make it the last tab on that workbook. Select OK. And now that sheet is combined with my transactions export. So I'm going to go back into question data and create another pivot table. So again, I'm going to select this top left corner to select all my data, go into the tab of data, select pivot table. It works its magic. Now I have my pivot table builder, again, populated pretty randomly with data that isn't really much use to me. So I'm going to click on each one, move it out of the builder. It's going to poof away, and I have a blank state to work with again. So once again, whatever I drag in, it's going to populate with, and the pivot table will respond accordingly. So you can play with it and find a report that works best for you. But I would suggest the following for analyzing post-market questions: that you break up your rows by market and answer date as well, and you create your rows as question text, and you populate your values with the response to those questions. Now you'll notice that one of the possible selections here is question type, and that's because, as I mentioned earlier, the questions report will generate post-market questions as well as new and repeat user questions for people that have been using the app at the website. So you can filter your pivot table or your data within the actual raw data spreadsheet using the filtering tools that Katie discussed earlier to view post-market questions or repeat and new user questions. But right now for this market, they've been in the world of Harry Potter, entering only post-market questions, so that is what we're seeing. So again, I've created my rows with market and answer date and my columns as the question text. My values always populate with the count, which is not really useful to me. So I'm going to change this to sum. So now I can see the sum of my questions here, how many producers were selling at this market today. So on August 8th, I know 21 vendors, easy. But we can see here that FM Tracks responds to the questions that you select within your profile. So every market has the 6 required questions that are denoted with the asterisks. But for other questions that are selected, they are going to come up as well. But if you don't want to see all of that and say you just want to see those questions on vendors, you can again select the down arrow next to column, deselect all by clicking select all, and then select the questions that you want to see. So if I want to see just for vendors, I've selected those 3. If I want to make these columns a little bit smaller so that I can easily read it all, I can select rows 3 and 4 and go to this little icon that says wrap text. If you ever have a data set that has long questions, that will allow you to really easily reformat it. So then I can just select all, and if you have everything highlighted, when you reformat one cell, the others are going to become the same width as well. One second. Great, there we go. So now I can see the totals for vendor, and right now this is the sum of vendor, but say I want to go back and edit this a little bit more to bring back my pivot builder since it's disappeared. I just click this purple tab by data called pivot table, and the icon of builder. Here we have it back. So if you're looking at vendor data, one thing that you might want to see is the average vendor count. So I can select average. And a most useful one, if you're not looking at data broken down by date, but are instead looking at it over the market season, you might want to look at max, because as you know, many markets will have a varying amount of vendors, and that will show you the top number of vendors. But I want to change everything to looking at sum and include the questions on redemption. So again, I just click the down filter arrow by columns. It's going to bring up another box, and I can select the questions that I want to see. So let's include the information on amount of redemption of SNAP EBT and incentives. So now I have taken that long amount of raw data on your questions, your post-market questions report, and it's put into something that I can easily analyze. If I want to copy this and add the data into a different sheet, as we did before with the transaction data, again, I'm going to select all of the columns. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy. I'm going to go back into the sheet where I copied my transaction data. And remember, the trick with pasting data from a pivot table is to, okay, it's been suggested that instead I'd show you what happens if I don't paste it as values. So if I just paste it normally, it is going to paste my pivot table. Or it should paste my pivot table. Let's try one more time. So again, copy.
So the problem here that you want to be careful of, if you're copying from the entire workbook, you have to paste into the entire workbook. In this instance, we're just going to copy the actual table itself.
And then when I go to paste it, so if you want to paste a pivot table, you should go to paste values to get the view that we got up there with transaction data. If you paste it just normally, you get the actual pivot table, which again, you can't edit. So just keep that in mind whenever you are pasting a pivot table, to paste values and not the entire thing.
This is why you don't want to paste the pivot table. You just want to paste the cells themselves. So again, I think we're going to pause for some questions. So while we're waiting, Elizabeth, please.
I really like snow peas, and when I opened the first snow pea pod of the season, one fell out and rolled under the fridge. You might say it was an escapee.
All right, sounds like you guys are really enjoying the pivot table lessons. You don't have any questions.
Ask questions or we'll tell more jokes.
But know that we will be providing you guys with a resource that's sort of a step-by-step of everything we did, as well as some videos from a resource that we like to use. And so if you have questions, if things come up, certainly reach out to us, and my contact information is on the slides that we'll return to. But like it seems you guys are experts in this, so we're going to go ahead and move on to away from pivot tables, and we're going to do conditional formatting. So conditional formatting is a relatively, I'd say, intermediate but very easy to use tool. So what it allows me to do, this is why it's really important to rename your tabs when you're doing pivot tables. This way you can easily find which ones you want to keep, and then for the pivot table ones, you can always actually delete these. You'll be able to make it again if you need to, but that way, you know, you've taken these reports, you've put them onto one single spreadsheet file, you've got, you know, your clean version, and then you've got your raw data in case you need to access it. And so that way you can just keep a really nice clean spreadsheet. But what we're going to do right now is, let's say I wanted to know, you know, with any information I have on Excel, I want to identify whichever one of these cells maybe is greater than 50 or greater than 100. Or maybe I want to identify which days of the season were my top performing days, the top 10% or the top 10. All of this can be done very easily. And that's all you'd want to do, is you'd want to highlight whatever it is you're wanting to format. In this case, I'm going to look at sales, and I want to know the top 50% sales days. So here, right on this main home layout, is a button that says conditional formatting. And by clicking on this, already we see a bunch of options. You can, for instance, highlight cells that are greater than a value, less than. If you have text, you want to find a cell that contains, Hogsmeade, for instance, you might want to use this one. There's also ways that you can highlight duplicate values. So conditional formatting can really be used in a lot of different spreadsheets outside of your FM Tracks data. So this is definitely a tool, if you're not using it already, play around with, and it can really help you save a lot of time. So I'm going to do the top 10%, and this is going to bring me into a new formatting rule. I can actually customize things really any which way. So I could say, I don't want to know the top 10, I want to know the top 25%, or I just want to know the top 25 days. I can choose any of these preset formats. So green fill with dark green text, that would be things that are the top. Maybe light red fill, I'm going to conditionally format of these are the bottom performing things. And so whatever it is that you want, you can go ahead and do that, and that's going to highlight any cell that is in the top 25%. Now, something to note from the pivot table is that it gives you your totals at the top. So clearly in this instance, these aren't top 10% days, but they are values, or 25%. These are values that are above 25%. So we can do the same thing for incentive. We could say, I want to know any day that we gave out incentives more than $50. And again, in a click of a button, I've now color-coded my spreadsheet in such a way that makes it really easy to digest and interpret the numbers. And we're doing pretty well on time, so I'm going to actually go ahead and show you guys one additional tip before we move away from Excel. And that's going to be, this pivot table. We're just going to move this over here so this doesn't create any problems. And what I want to do is I want to get rid of this timestamp. The timestamp keeps me from being able to do certain things in sorting, and it's just a little frustrating to use. So let me scroll over, and I can highlight all of these cells. Let's go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to go back to data. And what I'm going to do is something called text to columns. So when I click text to columns, it's showing me a preview of how my data is going to be formatted. I'm going to click delimited. So anytime there's a symbol that I'm going to specify, such as a comma or a space, that's what's going to create a new cell and separate out this column. So right now it's under tab, that's the default. I'm actually going to do space, and you can see immediately how the timestamp and the EST have been removed from the cell. If you wanted to change where they would go, this destination box is where you would be doing that. And you may need to do something like say what kind of data it is, that it's a date or that it's text. So right now you can see, with the exception of this one market that ended up getting split, for the most part I can just go ahead and delete these columns, and now I have cleaned up by day in a much more usable format than we started with. And I do want to stress that as part of our latest development for FM Tracks, we are working really hard to improve the reporting so that it can provide these aggregate totals in a clean, easy, instant download way. And so the purpose of this webinar was really to provide everybody with the tools that they need while that is being developed. As this is our beta year, we've certainly been taking all of your feedback throughout the year to create a better product. And we wanted to make sure for everyone who's got their data in the system that you're equipped with everything you need to be able to generate reports that you can use for grant writing, that you can report back to your funders, or that you could use to make different charts or infographics. So we hope that this has been really helpful in that regard. And now, since we haven't had any additional questions come in, we're going to go ahead and show you a really cool, exciting new feature within Google that will help taking time out of making really professional looking charts from whatever spreadsheet you're starting with.
Great. So again, we are going to be sending out some links as a follow-up email to all attendees on this webinar that have a series of online tutorials, not made by us, just a free online resource on enhancing your Excel skills that will go into details on how to create charts in Excel. But we don't have time for that today. So instead, as Katie mentioned, we are going to kind of have a workaround here to show you a way that at the click of a button, you can generate pretty charts on your data using Google. So if you have a Google account, if you'll just go into Google Drive, so you can go to, oh, here we go. Great. So from your Google Drive, you can import your Excel file or just copy those values and paste it into a Google Sheets. Google Sheets is very much like Excel. It's their Google version. It's online. It's free for anyone with a Google account. So you'll see that what we've pulled up looks pretty much exactly like the transaction report we had before. Now, the feature that we want to show you is this tiny, discrete, little, unassuming button down in the bottom that says Explore. So explore your data. Let's see what happens. So this function is going to grab data from all the columns that you select and generate infographics based off it. It is a computer. It's not quite as responsive as it would be if you were generating something in Excel using the Excel skills that you have or are wanting to develop, but it's pretty awesome that at a click of a button, I can get a whole slew of infographics. So here we can see sales based on day of the week. Anytime you hover over, it'll give you that exact percentage and tell you a little bit more about what you're looking at. Here is a histogram of purchase amount. So if I want to look at that closer, I can select this insert chart and it's going to come out. I can make it bigger and expand. And there I can see that most of the purchases made were $10 purchases with $15 and $20 increments following it. So not necessarily data you want to know, but maybe it is. And there are plenty of others. We can see it'll break it down by the percentage of sales per market. So obviously Hogsmeade is taking the lion's share of these in the Harry Potter farmers market world. We can see a histogram of incentives similar to the one we saw for purchase amount, as well as a pie chart generated that shows that 66% of sales recorded for these markets were credit and debit sales, and about 34% were SNAP EBT sales. You can also edit these graphs to be different depending on what sort of report you are wanting to do. So again, you can pop that right out, maybe resize it so it's a little bit larger. By clicking on the title, I can rename it. I can click on any data point. I can change the color, I can change the size, I can change the shape, I can find a trend line, and you'll see that as that pie chart we looked at showed, all of these cells were credit debit transactions that had no incentive, or they were a one-to-one SNAP EBT incentive purchase amount. So that makes sense that we would see data points clustered around various sales with zero incentives and then a one-to-one linear line here. This is a very responsive tool. So it is going to generate, oh, sorry, looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. But it is going to generate data charts based on what data I select. So say that I just want to analyze payment type, and incentive type. So I'll select column G, command select I, and then I'll see that it's going to generate charts just based on that. If I want to look just at purchase amount, it will generate charts on what I have selected, as well as up top here, it's going to do some quick calculations that you can also do in Excel, but if you don't have those skills or experience, you can throw your data in here and it's going to show us that $18.14 was the average purchase amount. It'll show you the max amount as well as the number. I can click on incentive amount and it'll generate that for incentive amount as well. So again, this is not the be-all end-all of reports or graphs, but it is a way that you can really easily, at the click of a button, have some pretty professional looking charts made from your data. So between the pivot tables that we've shown you, the conditional formatting that Katie discussed, and these charts, you should be able to export your data from FM Tracks, both the transaction reports and the question reports, and have some pretty comprehensive, professional looking data to show your partners and your funders.
Great. All right. So again, if anybody has a question, please go ahead and send that in now. Although I would also appreciate if someone would just send one in so I know that it's been working, because you guys seem to have don't have any questions about most of the stuff we showed. And I just want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask questions with us now before you embark on this by yourself. So great. Thank you for testing this for me. Will this recording be available to reference back to later? And yes, we have been recording this entire time, and that recording is going to go out in the follow-up email. So this will be available to you, as well as sort of a description of what we did step by step to help you utilize these reports for your network and markets. So what happens if we find bad data? So that's a really great question. What we have been doing here at Wholesome Wave is our partners at Case Western Reserve University have been really helpful in running reports that allows us to sort of find outliers or possibly misentered data. So it's a $0 transaction with $0 incentive, but there's a customer name there. So that might be indicative that that was entered incorrectly. So if I were to go to the Chamber of Secrets market page here, if I go to the transactions page, this is where people will manually enter their transactions. I can also go to the transaction log. This can show me about 90 days at a time. So if you see data, it's incorrect, you're going to have the ability to go into this log and actually update anything you'd like. And you can do that with the pencil icon. You can do that. You can delete it. You can enter a new one. And this is something that you can always change, and you can edit many different features on here, not just the amounts, but things like the payment type, whether there's an incentive as part of this, and you are able to update that. And the system will keep track of whoever updated it last. So you'll know if someone else has updated your data for you. In terms of post-market questions, we are working with our developers to make a redemption section that is more similar to this setup, where we have a log that you can edit it. And very shortly, if not before the end of this week, we're actually going to be able to open up all post-market questions. If you haven't been able to complete them throughout the season, what you're going to see when you come to this page, we have it currently on a testing website, but we're making sure everything works and that there are absolutely no bugs so that you guys don't have to find those for us before we release. And there'll be a drop-down menu where you can choose any date going back to as far as May, but if you need it earlier, please let us know. And you'll be able to enter that information based on whatever questions you currently have set in your questions tab. So for the post-market questions, every single network and market is going to have these 6 questions listed. But if you've been collecting information this entire season about other pieces of information and you want to make sure that you're entering that, just come to this questions page and click all of the additional questions you would like to show up.
We do want to reiterate that this webinar is being recorded and that we will be sending a link out as well as some additional resources, and we will include the link from our previously recorded webinar on manually entering data on FM Tracks. That was our topical webinar from November. So we'll be sending a follow-up email to all webinar participants tomorrow, and it'll include the link to this. So if you miss anything or want to review, you can go back in and rewatch this as many times as your heart desires.
We do have a question about Android tablets and FM Tracks. And so one thing that we have found, although we weren't really sure of the initial market, how many people have Android tablets versus Apple tablets. And so this is a question we get a lot, and we would like to have, an app that could be downloaded on your iPhone or downloaded on your Apple or your Android tablet. But what we have in the meantime is that if you can get on any browser, if you have a data plan or if you can hotspot from your phone at the market, or if you're lucky enough to actually have a Wi-Fi connection at the market, any browser on your phone or on any tablet will open this website, and that will allow you to go ahead and enter manual transactions. So the only thing that you won't be able to collect is consumer data on surveys, on things like zip codes, or any of the repeat user questions we asked to learn more about the demographics of your market. And again, that's something that we're trying to work on to ensure that the web capability is as functional. And so stay tuned. We're looking for a March release for our FM Tracks 2.0 version once we're officially out of this beta testing year. So we'll be sure to continue to have webinars in the off seasons to train everyone on the most recent developments and any new functionalities that come out. I also want to point out we have an FAQ page that we are going to, that's going to be on the slides, you'll see, but we can also send that link out to everyone, and that's where you'll find videos of tutorials that we'd constantly be updating as new functionalities of the website come out. So in case we don't have a webinar right away, you'll still be able to get that information. So it looks like we're down to one of our last questions, and it's about whether or not the Firefox browser is the preferred browser. When we were initially starting out, it did seem from our developers that Firefox was considered less buggy, but our staff here at Wholesome Wave have been using Chrome as well as Firefox interchangeably, and we aren't seeing this clear trend. That being said, if you ever do have a bug, something that is keeping you from being able to enter information the way that you'd like to, please let your program manager know. That'll be either Leah or Ava, Lauren, Steven, or Marianne. And when you let them know, it's also great to mention what browser you were using, because our development staff will then try to recreate the issue, and that helps them sort of recreate it exactly as you had done. One final question, it looks like. Oh, how does Safari compare to Chrome? I haven't been using Safari personally, so I cannot comment on it to say definitively, but it should be a functional website on all browsers. It's the bottom line really for that. Whether you're on a PC or a Mac, the website we've been working really hard. Every time you guys give us feedback, we send it straight to our developers, and we have made so much progress just in the past couple months, thanks to all of your communication with us about this tool. And that's what really makes this beta testing year so important. And I just want to make sure everyone feels comfortable. If you are finding a problem with the website or the app, of course, reach out to us, and that's going to allow us to fix it for our entire network, which is about 300 markets using this tool. One last question, just going back to the graphs about the benefit of using graphing in Google versus Excel. And really, it's the benefits of the Google form is that you don't have to do anything to it. You literally just upload the file, and it will automatically, through default mechanisms, create those graphs. It's actually kind of hard to get it to do a different graph. You have to play with it a lot. So if you're looking for something quick and dirty, that's it's just easy, Google is a great tool to at least try out and see if it's giving you what you're looking for. Maybe that means you need to put only particular information in there. If you want a breakdown of SNAP and you don't want that mixed with cash, only put the SNAP data in there. But if you're using Excel, you can be far more sophisticated, and you can have multiple layers on the bar graphs, and you can just have more control over things. And so the benefit is really about whether or not you're comfortable using Excel and how much time it takes to make that graph. So we're right on 3 o'clock. So I just want to take us to this slide telling you guys there's one last office hour for the year. This is when me and Elizabeth are going to be sitting on GoToMeeting. And if you have a question, if you're trying to input data, if anything is happening, or maybe you just want to hear some more of our jokes, because we have several more planned. If that's the case, please join us. So this is tomorrow at 1:30. And if you ever need to schedule one of these one-on-one, again, let us know. And so please feel free to contact me, Katie Merritt, at wholesomewave.org. And then again, this is also our FAQ link, which we'll send to you in the follow-up email tomorrow. So great. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this webinar. We hope you learned a lot. We're going to send out a survey at the end, so please take the time to fill that out so that we can learn how important this was for you and ways we can improve for the next one. All right.